Okay, sociology. So, pardon. I hope you don't hear my brother in the back. He is actually a teacher as well, and he's lecturing. So we have this empty apartment that we have that we just lecture in. So we are moving on to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is on groups and organizations. So we are in week 7, but we're going into groups and organizations. Some of this might sound familiar. And it should, because in week 3, I went over the structures. So remember the structures, macro all the way to micro, world systems, societies, institutions, networks, groups, roles, and statuses. Again, this week we go into groups and organizations, but more in depth. So in that lecture in week 3, I just pretty much gave you guys a broad stroke, right? Defined what groups were, went over primary, secondary, and aggregate groups. This week, we go into not only other types of groups that we have in society, but we also tag on organizations. So how a lot of these schools, which is a type of organization, hospital, which is a type of organization, are set up, like run similar to bureaucracies. What is a bureaucracy? What is a meritocracy? We go into that. So wasting no time, let me share my screen with you guys and we can get started. Okay, I'm already on the bottom, so. Okay, so we move on to groups and organizations, okay? As usual, there are illustrations, drawings, images, sometimes data. Pause at these pictures, read the captions below them, and think about them, okay? So the national tour of the Tea Party Express visited Minnesota and held a rally outside the state capitol building, okay? Why is chapter 6 starting off like this with the figure, not a figure, but a picture of the Tea Party Express visiting Minnesota, specifically the state capitol building? Why? We're going into groups. Why is the Tea Party considered a group? That is all that we will figure that out throughout this lecture, because it is a type of group. But what makes this type of gathering classified as a group is what we're going to get into. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay, groups and organizations. Groups, like political parties, are prevalent in our lives and provide a significant way we understand and even define ourselves. In groups, we often feel a connection to those individuals in that group, and we also feel a disconnection from those who are not part of those groups, okay? So for instance, what are some of these groups that we feel connections to? I played high school and I also played college tennis. We had our own group. Not only did we sit together at lunch, in the cafeteria, had most of our classes together, studied similar things, but outside of tennis, we also had this solid group. And it was hard for those who, I won't say that they weren't friends, because they were, but those people who weren't involved in that tennis team or on the tennis team in college, it was hard for people to feel part of our group because we were known as, you know, the Emmanuel Tennis Girls. So I used to play at Emmanuel College in Boston, okay? Groups also play an important role in society. They help foster shared value systems and are key to the structure of society as we know it. Let's refer back to the 3 primary perspectives for studying groups and organizations. And as I've said throughout this entire semester up until this point, these 3 primary sociological perspectives can be used for every subject that we touch upon. So right now, we're going to use these 3 sociological perspectives. What are they? Pause, okay? What are they? And we're going to use them for analyzing groups and organizations. So again, the three sociological perspectives: structural functionalism, or the functionalist perspective, the conflict perspective, and the third is symbolic interactionism, or the interactionist perspective, or symbolic interactionists. Okay? Let's get into these three perspectives and their views on groups. So we can look at the Tea Party movement through the lens of these methods, these theoretical perspectives, to better understand the roles and challenges that groups offer. So let's first go into the functionalist perspective, okay? The functionalist perspective is a macro level view, okay, that looks at how different aspects of society are intertwined, okay? So the functionalist perspective, again, a macro level view. So it's looking at not society as a whole, but it's looking at things from more of a global, aka macro perspective. Okay, this perspective is based on the idea that society is a well-balanced system with all parts necessary to the whole. And it studies the roles that these parts play in relation to the whole. Okay, again, this perspective is based on the idea that society is a well-balanced system. Remember the functionalist perspective, right? This perspective states that, again, people are inherently flawed. So there are systems put in place that keep things in balance. I usually say that keep things in equilibrium, okay? And it studies the roles that these parts play in relation to the whole. A functionalist might look at what macro level needs the Tea Party movement serves. So, for example, let me move my face to the side. So, for example, a structural functionalist might ask how the party forces people to pay attention to the economy. Remember, if we go back to chapter 1 in our textbook, chapter 1 is an introduction to sociology, okay? Emile Durkheim, who's known as not just the father of sociology, but we know him and we classify him in the functionalist perspective, right? He says that people are inherently flawed. And because people are inherently flawed, right, there are systems put in place that keep people in check, that keep society functioning, that keep things moving and peacefully, right? Everyone wants peace. So here, if we take the Tea Party movement, and I'm sorry, like my textbook is just down here, but if we take the Tea Party movement, right, and we really look at what this group in society is trying to do, right, the functionalist is going to believe, well, it's a functionalist reality that this party has a certain function that keeps things in equilibrium. And here, the party, it is forcing people to pay attention to the economy. Remember, there are certain systems in place to the functionalists, again, okay? And those are family, religion, education, economy, and the state. Those are the main ones. I've said this before. Those are the main ones, right? And the economy is one of these main systems. We know them as institutions, okay? So, again, the economy is there to keep things in equilibrium. The family, just like the religion, just like education, just like the state. So, when it comes to the Tea Party movement, the structural functionalist is, again, going to ask how the party forces people to pay attention to the economy. Get it? Okay, because there is a way to the structural functionalist, there is a way. But how? Okay, because everything has a function to keep things in equilibrium. second perspective is the conflict perspective. It's also a macro level type of, it takes on a macro level type of view. It focuses on the genesis, so the beginning, and the growth of inequality. A conflict theorist studying the Tea Party movement, still thinking about that first image that we saw, might look at how business interests have manipulated the system over the last 30 years, leading to the gross inequality that we see today. Okay, the gross inequality, economic inequality that we see between those who have and those who have not. Okay, those who are part of the upper class and those who are part of the working poor and maybe even middle class. Okay? Or the conflict perspective might explore how the massive redistribution of wealth from the middle class to the upper class would lead to a two-class system reminiscent of Marxist ideas. Okay? So the conflict perspective is all about inequality. Okay? Specifically, if we're talking about the times that we live in today, I think I've mentioned this in other lectures, the conflict perspective is all around us. It's one of the clearest ones that we can see. And specifically today, we can see the conflict perspective based on groups in society. There are certain groups in society that are constantly making aware that there are gross types of inequalities in the United States. What are some of those? Think about them. What are some of the groups that are kind of like, not kind of like, but outwardly state, that publicize out there that things are drastically wrong in the United States and they are not fair between individuals? Think about it for a second. Besides the Tea Party movement, that is our main example, but use what you know today, okay? We have LGBTQIA movements. That's an example of the conflict perspective today. We have Black Lives Matter movements. We have indigenous Native American movements, another big one, right? For those of you who are paying attention to global news around the world, right? What's going on in Nigeria, right? The SARS movement, okay? I'm not talking about SARS like the illness. That's not what I'm talking about. And SARS in Nigeria, where Nigerians are dealing with police brutality and fighting for the rights of not just education, like equal education, but also the basic human rights: water, food, housing, clothes. Okay? But these are all examples of the conflict perspective as it pertains to groups. Okay? And again, these groups are saying that there are inequalities. People are inherently good. But if we're using the Marxist ideas, right, people are inherently good. But because of how certain not just upper, but certain groups that are in power have manipulated economic systems, racial systems, educational systems, healthcare systems, we have a crazy amount of inequality that we see today. Get it? Okay. And the last one is the symbolic interaction, or the interactionist perspective, or how I like to say it, the symbolic interactionist perspective. This is a micro level view. So instead of studying the big picture, so the functionalist and the conflict perspective, we're looking at big picture things. These researchers look at the day-to-day interactions that groups have, okay? Like that we have in our lives, that we deal with in our own micro groups. Studying these details, the interactionist looks at issues like leadership style and group dynamics. So in the case of the Tea Party movement in our book, an interactionist might ask, how does the group dynamic in New York, or let's say, how does the group dynamics of the Tea Party movement in Boston differ from the one in New York or from the one in Atlanta? Okay, we're bringing it down. We're not looking at the Tea Party movement around the United States, which would be macro. We're taking it down to a micro level. Let's look at the Tea Party movement in Boston. And let's look at how it differs from New York, from Maine, etc. Or what dictates who becomes the de facto leader in different cities? Okay, based on geography, social dynamics, or economic circumstances. Get it? Okay. So let's get to defining a group. And again, this was done in not chapter 3, but we did this, or I defined it for you guys in week 3, okay? So the term group is vague, okay, and can refer to a wide variety of gatherings, such as a group. We could define a group as 2 people. So think about a group project in school when you're partnered with another student. Think about a club. A group can also be defined as a club, okay? And again, that example of me on my college tennis team, okay, is an example of that. So a regular gathering of friends or people who work together or share a hobby. In short, the term group refers to any collection of at least 2 people who interact with some frequency and who share a sense that their identity is somehow aligned with the group, okay? But of course, every time people are gathered is not necessarily a group. Think about those instances when people gather, but we wouldn't necessarily call them a group. What are some instances of that? Okay, so there are also aggregate groups, okay? A rally is usually a one-time event, for instance, and belonging to a political party doesn't imply interaction with others. Aggregate groups consist of people who exist in the same place and at the same time, but who do not interact or share a sense of identity, such as a bunch of people standing in line at Starbucks. These can be considered crowds. So crowds are an example of, you know, a mass gathering of people that we wouldn't classify a group. So for instance, imagine the Patriots winning the world championship and everybody going down to Fenway. Is it Fenway? No. What's the stadium? Foxborough, sorry. Foxborough Stadium, okay? And everybody heading down to Foxborough Stadium, okay? That's not a group. That is a crowd, okay? What's another example besides your Starbucks and your sports team, like mass crowd, just celebration types of things? Think of them, okay? Think of some of your own, okay? Another example of a non-group is people who share similar characteristics but are not tied to one another in any way. These people are considered a category. So for example, all children born from approximately 1980 to 2000 are referred to as millennials, okay? Why are millennials a category and not a group? It's because while some of them share a sense of identity, they do not as a whole interact frequently with each other. So I'm not interacting with people who were born, you know, necessarily not in the, I'm not interacting with a whole bunch of millennials. I am a millennial, but, you know, yeah, I wouldn't even consider myself a group. We're a category, okay? So the types of groups, here is the repeat, okay? Groups can be broadly divided into two categories, primary and secondary groups. Primary groups play the most critical roles in our lives. The primary group is usually fairly small and is made up of individuals who generally engage in face-to-face, long-term emotional ways. So this group serves emotional needs. The primary group is usually made up of significant others, those individuals who have the most impact on our socialization. The best example of a primary group being family. And if you recall, back in week 3, I said that when it comes to primary groups, I do think that this definition should slightly change. Okay, yes, right, primary groups are they are fairly small, and we do engage with people who are in our primary groups in long-term emotional ways, but they don't necessarily, today in 2020, have to be face-to-face. Okay, so for instance, again, the family is the best example of the primary group. I rarely see my sister. Okay, rarely see my sister. However, I would still consider her to be part of my primary group. Okay, she does still fulfill a long-term, like, emotional need, right? There's purposes, right? However, I don't engage with her face to face. However, with the invention of, the smartphone, I can call her every day, especially with the WhatsApp, and for free. Okay, so you don't have to engage face to face constantly, at least not in my opinion. But let's keep the book definition. Sound good? Who's in your primary group? And is family the only one that you can think of? Or can you think of other types of people besides family that you would put in your primary group? For some of you, and I've had students say this before, they consider sometimes their workplace, depending on the environment, to be part of their primary group. Okay? I personally wouldn't consider anybody part of work to be part of my primary group, because work is work. I come here to work. I love doing what I do, but I'm here also not to make friends. I'm here to teach and make a living. Okay? But who do you consider part of your primary group? Secondary groups are often larger and impersonal. They may also be task-focused and time-limited. These groups serve an instrumental function rather than an expressive one. A classroom or office can be an example of a secondary group. Okay? So I would say that this section of sociology is a secondary group. And why would I say that? It's task-focused, right? We're all here, we're learning sociology. It's only for a certain amount of time too. We're only gathering for 16 to 17 weeks online. But other than that, after that time limit has passed, it's done, okay? We don't interact with each other anymore after 16 to 17 weeks. Some of you, I might have you next semester, okay? Whether it be in criminology or it might be in research methods, psychology, okay? But other than that, we're a secondary group, okay? If any of you are doing class assignments, group projects, okay? That's a secondary group. Task-focused, time-limited. Neither primary or secondary groups are bound by strict definitions or set limits. In fact, people can move from one group to another. A graduate seminar, for example, can start as a secondary group focused on the class at hand, but as students work together throughout their program, they may find common interests and strong ties that transform them into a primary group. okay? So I don't go to work to make friends, but I have had jobs in the past before I became a professor where, you know, you have those one or two people that, you know, it started off just, you know, we're work friends, but then it grew into, yo, we're friends outside of this, we're actual friends. Now you're part of my primary group, my close knit. You're not family, but you're there, right? You serve an emotional purpose, and I'm constantly seeing you face to face. Not every day, but face to face, okay? In groups and out groups, okay? This is different. So now we're moving into, again, things that we didn't mention in that third lecture at all. So the rest of this is brand new. Sociologist William Sumner developed the concept of in-group and out-groups to explain the feeling and phenomenon experienced when we belong to an elite or select group or not being allowed in it. He referred to these things as in-group and out-group, as I previously just stated. An in-group is the group that an individual feels he or she belongs to, and he or she believes it to be an integral part of who he or she is. Okay? And an out group is a group someone doesn't belong to. Often, we may feel disdain or competition in relationship to an out group. So, for example, for any of you who are on the NECC baseball team, or a team outside of the college, or a club outside of the college, you might feel that that group that you belong to is an integral part of who you are. It might be part of who you identify yourself as. It might be part of your identity. Okay, for some of you who might go on to four-year colleges and enter sororities and fraternities, this might be part of your in-group. You might be in an in-group. I would say you are, okay? For those of us who are not part of certain types of groups, these groups to us would be out groups, okay? We don't belong to these. People may belong to or be an outsider to any of these. Primary groups consist of both in-group and out-groups, as do secondary groups. Okay. Another figure here, engineering and construction students gather around a job site. How do your academic interests define your in-group and your out-groups? Okay. Think about that. How do your academic interests, what you're interested in studying while you're at NECC, how does that define your in-group and your out-groups? And it might help if you think about, for those of you who aren't necessarily in high school, I know I have a lot of you high school students, but this might pertain more to those of you who are in college. You know, you've left high school. Have some of those friendships from high school dwindled? Okay? If so, why? Okay? Have your academic interests now, like, can you actually see you going on to school and maybe some of your friends not going on to school? Has that defined who's in and who's out? Think about it. It's not to say that those of you who are in high school can't think about this either. Some of you are going to go through this, okay? A lot of you are going to go through this. So a lot of you are tight right now, you know? But some of you are going to choose to go on to college. Some of you are not. Some of you are going to choose to study certain types of fields, and some of you are not. These may end up defining your in-group and your out-groups. Something to think about. Reference groups. A reference group is a group that people compare themselves to. It provides a standard of measurement. In the US, society peer groups are common reference groups. Kids and adults pay attention to what their peers wear, what music they like, what they do with their free time, and they compare themselves to what they see. Refer back to the looking glass mirror. Okay? Do we care about how people view us? And I would say, you know, like thinking back to my high school years, you know, like my peer group was a reference group. And it wasn't just my peer group that was a reference group. I would say, you know, I was an oddball in high school. I don't know if you guys could tell, but I'm odd, okay? But I played tennis in high school. I started playing tennis in high school. I still play. You know, I haven't played in a while, but I was the only person of color on my high school team. Yeah, and I didn't fit in many places. I fit in with my tennis team just because that's what bonded us, and we were all really, really good. But I didn't fit in everywhere else, you know, but I wanted to. So that's what I'm getting to. But I wanted to. So I often used, you know, the peers around me, not just the ones in my group, because I kind of, you know, I long to be out. But I used the peers as a reference group. So especially when it came to clothes, you know, I went through a baggy stage. I went through the flares and the bell bottoms, the platform shoes, Spice Girls type stuff, you know? So yeah, okay. So I agree with a lot of this reference stuff. Y'all kids are crazy today, so I don't know. I don't know. But think about it, okay? Most people have more than one reference group. So a middle school boy might not just look at his classmates, but also his older brother's friends and see a different set of norms. And he might observe the antics of his favorite athletes for yet another set of norms or behaviors. What are some examples of reference groups that you have? Okay. Today, the older I am, I do have some reference groups. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but definitely like, yeah, I do. Especially when you want to acquire something or, yeah. Okay. What are some of the reference groups that you have? Athletes are often viewed as reference groups for young people. Are some of you involved in sports, right? And are there certain athletes that you look up to? When it comes to athletes also, you know, is there a certain type of body figure, physique that you look forward to or like you compare yourself to, etc. Right? In the age of Instagram, this is very big. In the age of TikTok, this is very, very big, right? For those of you who watched Misrepresentation, this was slightly said, but women in the class, right? Those of you who would define yourself as women, might be are women, etc., right? Is there a certain type of body that you use as a reference group or a certain type of people that you look to for a reference group when it comes to body type? Men too. Sound good? Which fraternity or sorority would you fit into, if any? Okay, Sorority Recruitment Day offers students an opportunity to learn about these different groups. So when you get to big four-year schools, a lot of you guys may pledge to a fraternity or sorority. Sorority for those of you who are women, fraternity for those of you who are not, and they are also starting to develop some other ones for those who identify as other. okay? Would you fit into any of these, okay? These fraternities and sororities also have a lot of issues as well, currently in the media. So, but I will say that I do have family members who have pledged in fraternities and sororities. And again, we went over networks briefly, but these provide an opportunity for crazy, and when I say crazy, like I'm saying it in a positive way, for crazy networks, right? Your potential employer could be part of the fraternity that you pledged to or the sorority that you pledged to. And simply based off of that alone, you have a job. That's how strong those networks could be. But let's keep on going on with groups. Okay. Here's another illustration. Cadets illustrate how strongly conformity can also define groups. Okay, so socialization chapter, okay, we went over the resocialization process that some of us will go through, some of us have gone through, some of us are going to go through, right? And when you are enlisting in the Army, certain types of cadets, whether it's not just has to do with the Army, but also policing, right? We have a police department on campus as well as a sheriff's department on campus that cadets go through, right? And these institutions strongly reshape and make their cadets conform, okay? Because these cadets are now part of a group. Good? Group size and structure, okay? So we've gone into what groups are, different types of groups. We're gonna add on to the structures that, and the sizes that groups can take. So dyads, triads, and large groups. A small group is typically one where the collection of people is small enough that all members of the group know each other and share simultaneous interaction, such as a nuclear family, a dyad, or a triad. The difference between a dyad or a two-member group and a triad, which is a three-member group, okay, that's where the difference lies. So dyad, 2, triad, 3. The dyad, right, the group can no longer exist if a member leaves. So for example, a divorce, you know, between a couple, okay? If one partner decides to peace out, there is no more dyad. The group is done, okay? So when a divorce takes place, it effectively ends the group of a married couple or of two best friends never speaking, okay? A triad, if one person leaves, then then the group can live on with 2 people, okay? If there are 3 in the group, 2 against 1 dynamics can oftentimes develop, and there exists the potential for a majority opinion on any issue. Small groups generally have strong internal cohesiveness and a sense of connection. The challenge, however, is for small groups to achieve large goals. They can struggle to be heard or be a force for change if they are pushing against larger groups. In short, they are easier to ignore. Okay, so group size, dyad, triad. Group leadership. Often, larger groups require some kind of leadership. In small primary groups, leadership tends to be informal, okay? So in these small types of groups, these primary groups, the leader kind of just emerges, okay? Nobody says, you are the leader, you are the master. They just emerge, okay? In secondary groups, leadership is usually more overt. There are often clearly outlined roles and responsibilities with a chain of command that follows. Some secondary groups, like the military, have a highly structured and clearly understood chain of commands, and many lives depend on this chain of command. Okay? Other secondary groups, like a workplace or a classroom, also have formal leaders, but the style and the function of leadership can vary significantly. Think of NECC, or if you're in high school, think of your high school. There is a chain of command. Who's at the top? Your principal, right? And for the college, it's the president. Who's underneath that? The VPs. Who's underneath that? Okay? And then just follow that chain. Okay? So when it comes to things like the armed forces, they're highly structured. When it comes to things such as like schools and workplaces, right, they're also structured, but their styles and function of leadership will vary. Leadership function refers to the main focus or goal of the leader. An instrumental leader is one who is goal-oriented and largely concerned with accomplishing set tasks. We can imagine that an Army general for a Fortune 500 CEO would be an instrumental leader. In contrast, expressive leaders are more concerned with promoting emotional strength and health and ensuring that people feel supported. So for example, social and religious leaders are often perceived as expressive leaders. Why? Right? What do social and religious leaders, what kinds of things do they provide? Okay? It is that like, why do people go to church? Okay? Why, for healing, for blessing, for emotional help. Okay? That's why they're considered expressive leaders, right? Why do you go to a psychiatrist? Why do you go to a psychologist? Why do you go to a therapist? Okay? Emotional healing. There's a long-standing stereotype that men are more instrumental leaders and women are more expressive. Do you guys still see this existing today? Think about it, okay? Here's an image of presidential candidate in 2016, Hillary Clinton, who drew fire for her leadership style, okay? And many of you weren't able to, I don't think so, depending on how old you are in this class, but probably many of you weren't able to vote. Probably many of you weren't necessarily very concerned with the 2016 elections, but you can Google some of the things that people said about her style, the way she presented herself, right? Women are often assumed to be more expressive, right? But with Hillary, that didn't necessarily come off, okay? And I'm not telling you whether it's right or wrong, okay? With me, a lot of people think I come off as, well, in email, I'm definitely like, make sure you're taking care of yourself, blah, blah, blah. Like, and it's true, it's true. But if you meet me face to face, a lot of people wouldn't think I'm very expressive, more like, let's get this done, okay? So what do you guys think? Do we still expect women to be more expressive, so emotional, focused on like everyone's health in the group, or task-oriented, like the leadership role? So again, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's experiences provide an example of the way society reacts to a high-profile woman who is an instrumental leader, again, task-oriented. Despite the stereotype that we have for women in society as to how they are or should be, Boatwright and Forrest have found that both men and women prefer leaders who use a combination of expressive and instrumental leadership. Okay. Here is a figure, an image again of a gag gift that demonstrates how female leaders may be viewed if they violate social norms. And again, Hillary Clinton was oftentimes videoed and pictured wearing pants and with her arms crossed, okay? Again, I ask you, how do we view women in leadership roles? Do we view them as instrumental leaders or expressive leaders? Okay. Laissez-faire leaders, okay? This is French for leave it alone. So laissez-faire leader is the leader that's hands-off. This person allows group members to self-manage and make their own decisions, okay? So an example of this kind of leader might be an art teacher who opens the art cupboard and leaves the materials and tells students, help yourself, okay? While this style can work well with highly motivated and mature participants who have clear goals and guidelines, it risks the group's dissolution and a lack of progress. Authoritarian leaders, and I'm sorry I'm bouncing my face up and down, but it's so I can read the PowerPoint. Authoritarian leaders, they issue orders and assign tasks. These leaders are clear instrumental leaders with a strong focus on meeting the goals. Some examples of these leaders include entrepreneurs such as Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, etc. Okay? It's not surprising though that authoritarian leaders risk alienating the workers. There are times, however, when this leadership style can be required. In different circumstances, each of these leadership styles, okay, can be effective and successful. In addition to these leadership functions, there are different leadership styles again. So there are democratic leaders. These are leaders who encourage group participation in all decision making. They work hard to build consensus before choosing a course of action and moving forward. This type of leader is particularly common in a club where members vote on the activities or projects. Most of you have probably experienced, if you are in a group that's in high school, this is a type of democratic leadership. Democratic leaders can be well-liked, but there is often a danger that they will proceed slowly since consensus building is time-consuming. A further risk is that group members might pick sides and entrench themselves into imposing factions rather than reaching a solution. Types of formal organizations, okay? And I know this video is running on long, so I think I'm just gonna make it long. Okay, and not split it up. Let's see what happens. So types of formal groups, types of formal organizations, from schools to businesses to healthcare to government, these organizations are referred to as formal organizations. They are highly bureaucratized. Indeed, all formal organizations are or likely will become bureaucracies. A bureaucracy is a type of ideal formal organization. Ideal does not mean best in its sociological usage. It refers to a general model that describes a collection of characteristics or a type that could describe most examples of items under discussion. Okay. Girl Scout troops and correctional facilities are both types of formal organizations. But why? Okay, why are they formal? So you can pause here and think about that. Okay. Formal organizations fall into three categories. Normative organizations, coercive organizations, and utilitarian organizations. Normative organizations are a group in which joining them is voluntary and typically done because people find membership rewarding. So The Audubon Society, a ski club, is an example of normative organizations. For some of you who do, what is it called, not collegiates, for intramural sports, you do it because not only is it voluntary, but you find its membership rewarding. You know, your neighborhood basketball team, your cleanup committees, etc. A coercive organization is a group that you must be coerced into or pushed to join. Okay, these include prisons or rehabilitation centers. Symbolic interactionist Irving Goffman states that most coercive organizations are total institutions. So again, why is somebody going to prison? Okay, you're pushed to go to prison. You're pushed to go to rehabilitation, not because you want to, but because a court orders you to. Okay, that's what makes it coercive. And remember what a total institution is. A total institution is one in which inmates or military soldiers have a controlled lifestyle in which total resocialization takes place. This was all stated in our socialization chapter. Lastly, a utilitarian organization are those that are joined because of a need for a specific material reward. So, for example, high school and workplace fall in this category. You join high school for your diploma, okay? You join the work field to make money because you need to live, okay? And bureaucracies, okay? Bureaucracies are an ideal type of formal organization, as I stated previously. They are a hierarchy of authority, a clear division of label, they have explicit rules, and they're impersonal. People often complain about bureaucracies, declaring them slow, rule-bound, difficult to navigate, and unfriendly. I will tell you, academia is a bureaucracy, and ECC is a bureaucracy. Oftentimes, your teachers complain. There are plenty of times why your teachers are out on the street protesting, okay? Fair wages, etc., right? They are difficult to navigate. Sometimes they can be brutal and unfriendly, and they're rule-bound, okay? There is a hierarchy of authority that refers to the aspect of bureaucracy that places one individual or office in charge of another, who in turn must answer to their own superiors. So for example, as an employee at Walmart, your shift manager assigns you a task. Your shift manager answers to his store manager, who must answer to their regional manager, and so on up the chain of command, up to the CEO, who must answer to the board members, who in turn answer to the stockholders. Everyone in the bureaucracy follows the chain of command. Okay. There's also a clear division of labor in bureaucracies. This was stated in the previous slide. It refers to the fact that within bureaucracies, each individual has specific tasks to perform. The existence of explicit rules also occurs, or we have within bureaucracies. It refers to the way in which rules are outlined and written down. There are examples of the clear division of labor and explicit rules. You can do that and read that on your own. Just pause the lecture here. Okay. Finally, bureaucracies, and let me just, bureaucracies, meritocracies, okay. Okay, finally, bureaucracies are also categorized by impersonality, which takes personal feelings out of the professional situation. So these characteristics grew to some extent out of the desire to protect organizations from nepotism, backroom deals, and other types of favoritism, simultaneously protecting customers and others served by the organization. Impersonality is an attempt by large formal organizations to protect their members. Large businesses like Walmart often situate themselves as bureaucracies. This allows them to effectively and efficiently serve volumes of customers quickly and with affordable products. The result is an impersonal organization, okay? And you'll often find that customers complain about places like Walmart because they care little to none about individuals, other businesses, and the communities that they find themselves in. Bureaucracies are, in theory at least, meritocracies. Okay, meritocracies are bureaucracies in which hiring and promotion is based on proven and documented skills rather than on nepotism or random choice. So for example, in order to get into a prestigious college like Harvard or Yale, you need to perform well on your SATs or ACTs and have an impressive transcript. In order to become a lawyer and represent clients, you must graduate from law school and pass your state bar, okay? So these things, these tests, these exams that you have to pass are your documented and your proven skills, okay? And again, hiring is based on those documented skills rather than you just being born into something or somebody choosing you. Of course, there are many well-documented examples of success by those who did not proceed through traditional meritocracies. So for example, think about technology companies with founders who dropped out of college. Bill Gates dropped out of college. Jeff Bezos dropped out of college. And they are trillionaires. Is Jeff Bezos, is he a billionaire? Billionaires. On the verge of a trillionaire, Bezos, right? So they didn't necessarily have to go up, show these documented skills. They don't have these documented skills, but still, they were able to become these leaders, these CEOs of these corporations. Also think about performers who become famous on YouTube or on TikTok or on Instagram because something of theirs goes viral. Again, no documented skills sometimes, right? Oftentimes, but again, these are examples of people who don't proceed through traditional meritocracies, okay? Wealthy families, when in bureaucracies, wealthy families hire tutors, interview coaches, test prep services, and consultants to help their kids get into the best schools. This starts as early as kindergarten for some people in New York City, where competition for the most highly regarded school is especially fierce. There are several positive aspects of bureaucracy. They're intended to improve efficiency. They ensure equal opportunity and ensure that most people can be served. And there are times when rigid hierarchies are needed. This is an example of a McDonald's wall storefront in Egypt, and McDonaldization, which your book goes over, is an example of a really fast-running bureaucracy, okay? But let's go over McDonaldization. McDonaldization of society, this is one of the last things in our chapter, refers to the increasing presence of the fast food business model in common social institutions. So it's this model that is being implemented, not just in fast food companies, but in places like schools, in places like hospitals, especially with COVID today, etc. Okay, this business model includes efficiency, predictability, calculability, and control monitoring, okay? So for example, in your average chain grocery store, people at the regular checkout, customers, while stockers keep the shelves full of goods and deli workers slice meat and cheese in order, okay? This is efficiency, okay? So at your average, this is an example at your average grocery store, okay? When you enter a store within that grocery chain, you receive the same types of goods, see the same store organization, and find the same brands at the same prices. Predictability. You will find that goods are sold by the pound so that you can weigh your fruit and vegetables rather than simply guessing at the price for that bag of onions or peppers, etc., while the employee uses a time card to calculate their hours and receive overtime pay. Calculability. Finally, you will notice that all store employees are wearing uniforms and usually a name tag so that they can be easily identified. There are security cameras to monitor the store, and some parts of the store, such as the stockroom, are generally considered off limits to customers' control. While McDonaldization has resulted in improved profits and increased the availability of various goods and services to more people worldwide, it's also reduced the variety of goods available in the marketplace while rendering available products uniform, generic, and bland. Okay. You can pause here. This is just the figure of jobs in fast food that will enjoy stronger than average growth in the coming years. This stops at 2018. We're in 2020, and I'm sure, okay, employment in the fast food industry probably has, I'm pretty sure it's probably gone down. Employment, right? Yeah. Okay. But, think about that. Think about that. I'm saying employment has probably gone down in fast food, but the reason why I'm not saying that the production of fast food is going down. I think it's increased. This is one to think about. Pause here. Okay. But before I let you guys go, okay, think of how McDonaldization has influenced schools that we're going to now. Okay. Remember the efficiency, calculability, predictability, control. Okay. How has it influenced schools in 2020, specifically with COVID? Something to think about. Peace out.